For the sake of $500,000, I pretended to be my brother and took care of his blind fiancée. The day she regained her sight, I disappeared without a word. We met again at a business interview. I had become an intern journalist. She had regained her identity as the heiress of the Lunar family, a powerful family. During the interview, they asked, "We heard that during your illness, thanks to your fiancé, Mr. Smith, for standing by your side. Is it true that you two are about to get married?" She smiled and raised her hand to show her engagement ring, saying, "Yes, we are getting engaged." Her gaze, however, seemed to intentionally or unintentionally fall on me sitting in the corner. Before the interview began, there was a lot of discussion in the room. The young lady we're interviewing today is the head of the entire River family. I heard that 5 years ago, she went blind and was even expelled from the River family. If it weren't for her fiancé's unwavering support, she probably wouldn't have survived. Shh, keep your voice down. I sat there, forcing a smile while my nails dug deep into my palm. Suddenly, my senior colleague Jim turned to me and said, "Tom, could you fetch me a glass of water?" As I walked towards the water dispenser near the door suddenly swung open, and someone walked in. My mind went blank for a moment. 3 years had passed, and Lunar had changed drastically. Her once delicate and slender figure had become tall and her facial features softer. "Excuse me," she said in a calm tone as she walked past me, not even sparing me a glance. She walked up to the stage with a few bodyguards surrounding her. When she passed by me, I froze in place for a moment before finally realizing. The 2 years I spent by her side were the lowest point in Lunar's life. She had been expelled from the Lunar family, had lost her sight in a car accident, and had no idea what I looked like. And that was probably for the best. I continued to fetch the water, and when I returned, the interview had already started. Lunar sat on the stage, calmly looking at the audience. She was answering the business-related questions with ease. Suddenly, the side door next to the stage opened. David walked in, smiling, and complaining to Lunar. "I'm sorry, Lunar. The film crew had some issues, and I arrived late." He adjusted his suit and took a seat next to Lunar. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly, becoming both heated and ambiguous. Jim handed me the glass of water and glanced at me as if he had discovered a new continent. "Tom, you know what? You and David look quite alike." I forced a smile and said, "Well, he's a big star. You're giving me too much credit." "Of course, we looked alike. We were brothers. We heard that during your illness, thanks to your fiancé, Mr. Smith, for standing by your side. Is it true that you two are about to get married?" My throat tightened as I watched Lunar on the stage. She smiled and raised her hand to show her left ring finger, displaying a simple silver ring. It was the same ring I had bought for her to make her happy all those years ago. Lunar, an heiress of the prestigious Lunar family, wearing such a cheap ring, looked out of place. She lightly brushed her fingertips over it and said, "Yes, we are getting engaged." Her gaze, for a moment or two, intentionally or unintentionally, landed on me in the corner. The microphone was handed to David next. "Mr. Smith, we heard that you've recently been filming a movie directed by Mr. Land. He rarely works with new actors. Does boss have something to do with it?" He admitted with a smile, "Of course, I've always had confidence in my professional abilities, but I also can't deny that Lunar has done a lot for me. I'm completely worthy of this favor." His confident attitude won the approval of everyone. Someone asked, "Can you share the story of how you supported each other during your low times with boss?" David's smile suddenly froze, and in the eerie silence, time seemed to slow down. After a while, Lunar chuckled lightly and took the microphone, saying, "There's not much to tell. Our memories are known only to the two of us." I felt a sudden pang in my heart and hastily lowered my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I would remember the past. When Lunar was a young girl, she had offended many people because of her stubborn personality. After she fell from grace, some people came looking for trouble. I was pushed down the stairs and ended up covered in blood. Those people were scared away, and I stood up, pretending that nothing had happened, and walked back to her side, saying, "Let's go home." But Lunar suddenly grabbed my hand and said, "You're injured. We need to go to the hospital." I protested, "I'm not. I can smell the blood." She suddenly raised her voice, and tears welled up in her misty eyes. She called me by my brother's name, "David, after I recover, I'll give you the grandest wedding in the world." After the interview, the sky grew gloomy. The rain was falling lightly outside the venue. Jim patted his pockets and told me, "Tom, I left the memory card inside. Can you go get it for me?" I stepped on the damp ground, jogging a little. The elevator's display showed the first floor. The door opened, and I collided with two people inside. David was looking at Lunar, chatting about the details of the set. Although her expression was indifferent, she was patiently listening. They seemed very close. When they saw me, David's expression turned unpleasant. "Sorry," I muttered incoherently and turned to leave via the stairs. But Lunar called out from behind, "Wait." I froze in my tracks. "Aren't you going to use the elevator?" "Go ahead." I hesitated and then replied, "Thank you, boss." She told me to use the elevator, but she didn't move out of the way. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on me. "Are you also a journalist for today's interview? Why didn't I hear you ask any questions?" I lowered my head and said, "Boss, I just graduated and came back to the country. I'm just an intern journalist, so I don't have the qualifications to ask questions." "I see," she replied indifferently, seemingly lost in thought. Meanwhile, David shot me a fierce glare, then said, "Shall we go, Luna? We have a meeting with Director Lou tonight." Luna finally shifted her gaze away from me and said, "Let's go." I stood alone in the elevator heading up, feeling lost. When I entered the venue, I had no idea there was a dinner event with Luna in attendance. Jim dragged me over and asked, "Are you okay, Tom?" I rubbed my aching stomach and said quietly, "Sorry, Jim, I had surgery on my stomach before, and I can't handle alcohol well." He furrowed his brows but then noticed the gold-embossed business card Lunar had handed me. "Tom, you're lucky today. You even got Lunar's business card. I've been working for years, and I've never had the chance to meet her in person." I looked at the business card with mixed feelings. Yeah, I guess I am lucky. As the night went on, I couldn't help but think back to the past. I had pretended to be David for 2 years to take care of Lunar, and in those 2 years, she had given me a chance to be close to her. But now, she had completely forgotten about me and was engaged to David. It was like those 2 years had never happened. As the night came to an end, Luna and David left the venue together, surrounded by a group of people. I watched them from a distance, feeling a sense of emptiness in my heart. I had done everything I could to help Luna during her lowest moments, but now, I was just a stranger to her. It was a bitter feeling, but there was nothing I could do about it. As I walked away from the venue, I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. Had pretending to be my brother and taking care of Luna for 2 years been the right decision? I couldn't answer that question. All I knew was that I had lost the woman I loved, and there was no going back. In the end, I forcefully sealed her words back with a passionate kiss, swallowing them. "Luna, I never saw you as a burden." That night, it felt like the whole world was turned upside down, leaving just the two of us. But now, at this moment, she brought up the past again. Sitting next to me was my close, intimate fiancé, David. Their whole world believed that those memories belonged only to them. The overwhelming bitterness choked me from within. In this uncomfortably close proximity, a familiar yet unfamiliar scent emanated from Luna and subtly enveloped me. It was everywhere, yet no longer mine. She paused for a moment, amidst the applause of the live audience, and finally said, "I will always remember that moonlight on that night, shining brightly enough to illuminate everything." I couldn't see it, but he described it to me all night long. I tightened my grip on the pen in my hand and bowed my head hastily, my eyes stinging, because I had modified my questions on the spot. I had asked about things that no one knew before. This interview was a resounding success. By the end of the show, the audience in the live studio had surpassed tens of millions. For the first time, I had uncovered the hidden secrets of the Lunar family's reigning figure. Everyone was excited. Backstage, Ellen patted my shoulder and said, "You truly are a journalist." Those impromptu questions were so sharp that no one could avoid answering them. But when I turned around, I saw Luna and David approaching. She suddenly fell silent. Luna looked at me with indifference and asked, "Did you prepare the questions for today?" I nodded. David, with a hidden agenda, said, "Tom, you're quite adept at hitting people where it hurts. But let me remind you, remember to uphold basic professional ethics. Don't imagine yourself to be above your station." I didn't say anything. I just looked at Luna again. She looked fierce and said, "Tom, you have strong capabilities. From now on, you will continue to handle media relations with our company." David suddenly turned to me, his eyes filled with fear and hatred. In a deserted corner, he stopped me and looked at me with caution and disdain. "Tom, you're truly insatiable. You took money from me in the beginning, and now you've come back for what?" I calmly replied, "I've graduated and returned to work." Just an ordinary statement. "Work, Tom? Do you think I'm a fool?" He suddenly seemed like he had gone mad, shouting at me, "Get out of here quickly. Tell them you voluntarily gave up the job of handling media relations. Otherwise, you won't have a good day left." I ignored him and walked away. David kept his word. Suddenly, I started hitting a wall everywhere. Several job opportunities that should have been mine were taken by others at the last moment. One evening before leaving work, my boss called me into the office. "Next month, there's an important annual development conference. Would you like to be the host?" I was slightly stunned and then he added, "It was boss who specifically requested you." After work, across the street from the office, there was a very familiar Rolls-Royce parked. The car window rolled down, revealing Luna's expressionless face. She said, "Since you're so curious about my past, why don't you come and ask me in person?" Tang? I lowered my head. I didn't mean to pry into boss's privacy. It's just for work. Even if it's for work, I gave you my personal business card. You could have contacted me to ask. I pursed my lips. There's no need, because at that moment, I suddenly realized that it had been 3 years. She was the all-powerful boss, not the hot-tempered little kitten anymore, scolded and then pitifully seeking my comfort. David family had dwindled. Without Luna's consent and indulgence, David would never dare to openly target me. Maybe, for her, that past was a source of shame, something she didn't want to mention. I needed to leave, but Luna stopped me. "Wait." She pushed open the car door, took a step, and blocked my way. Mr. Tom, can we talk? I asked with a hoarse voice. What does boss want to discuss? Lunar smirked. Let's talk about work, shall we? In the following weeks, Lunar came to see me twice more. We went over several crucial decisions to be announced at the press conference. Finally, as if she had just remembered something, she handed me a document. The large-scale tourism project that hasn't been announced yet is a direct collaboration with the provincial government. You can announce it at the press conference as an exclusive piece of news that you dug up. I remained silent for a moment, then took the document and said, "Thank you." Jim knew about it and tried to persuade me. "It seems like boss appreciates you. Shouldn't you subtly mention the fact that David is undermining you?" I was editing the script, smiling slightly. "No need. Do you think she would go out of her way to make trouble for her fiancé because of a random journalist?" On the day of the press conference, the venue was packed with people. Lunar's seat in the center should have been occupied, but it remained empty. Amidst the flashing lights, I was in the middle of announcing several important collaborations for the Shoe Corporation when a strange journalist stood up and loudly accused me. "Where did you steal this top-secret information from?" I frowned and responded, "My collaboration with Shoe Corp has been entirely above board." "Above board? A person like you who climbed up using shady methods, do you even have the right to say that?" He shouted. "I have evidence." Someone came up on stage. It was David. He stared at me with hatred but had to soften his tone to appease Lunar. "Lunar, don't let yourself be deceived by him. This guy is a habitual liar with a history." I closed my eyes, suppressing the surging emotions inside me. When I opened my eyes again, I could maintain a calm demeanor as I looked at Lunar. "Yes, I gave it to you. Back then, I pretended to be David to get close to you and steal confidential information from you for 2 years. Later, I took the money and left. I had forgotten about it all. Since you believed it was David from the beginning and even got engaged to him, what's the point of correcting it now?" I couldn't continue. I swallowed the choked words and took a deep breath, putting the microphone down and preparing to leave. But as I turned around, my wrist was grabbed, our skin touched, and I felt the familiar warmth from her palm. Her voice was low. "Does it still count when you said that? As long as I wore the ring you gave me, no matter where you were, you would recognize me at a glance?" My heart trembled for a moment. I didn't want to hear her defend David. I turned my head and said in a low voice, "I forgot I lied." In fact, during the years of studying abroad, I often thought of Lunar. In the winter when I was about to return to the Lunar family for her 20th birthday, it was the peak of our romance. The winters in the northern city were exceptionally dry, and even during kisses, sparks would occasionally fly from the static electricity. There were moments when she would whisper in my ear, "David," when things got intense. "David, don't leave me." It was like a bucket of cold water suddenly poured over my head. I suddenly realized that I had come to her side from the very beginning with an unspeakable purpose, replacing another person. Lunar once told me, when I was a child, my cousin tricked me into a closet, locked the door, and I almost died inside. The thing I hate most in my life is being deceived by others. If she knew the truth, would she also hate me to the bone? On the eve of Lunar's 20th birthday, her grandfather, the old master of the Lunar family, fell seriously ill and unexpectedly learned the truth from the past. From the beginning, Lunar had been deliberately framed. Even the car accident had been planned. He sent someone to contact David to bring Lunar back. David came to find me. He was already a famous male celebrity, looking down at me with his chin held high, saying, "Now that Lunar family wants to recognize her again, you're not still dreaming of soaring, are you? Give up on your dreams. No matter if it's Lunar family or Lunar herself, they only recognize me, David, from the beginning. You were just a knockoff." He took out a check from his bag and threw it at me. "Here's another $500,000. Stop dreaming of the impossible. Otherwise, I'll tell everyone about what happened back then." I suddenly raised my head and glared at him. "David, your mom is my mom too." He sneered. "What is she to me? Just a whore." I lost control and grabbed David's collar, fiercely delivering 2 punches. When I heard a sound, someone rushed in from outside the door, twisting my arm and pinning me to the ground. The big celebrity stood in front of me, looking down at me from a superior position. "Was I wrong?" he asked. "Take the money, go abroad, and stop being a nuisance. Otherwise, I'll make sure that all of Lunar's past indiscretions are engraved on her tombstone." He left. I stared at the check that had fallen lightly to the ground. I thought of 2 years ago. Because my mom was sick, our family had borrowed a lot of money. After her death, I couldn't even afford a decent grave. That was when David contacted me. "Need money?" He didn't even listen to me and chuckled. "She only raised me for a few days, and when a person dies, they die. Why should I give her money?" I thought he was resentful, so I tried to explain. "Initially, she wanted custody of you. You cried and wanted to go with Dad dash. Of course, I wanted to go to the David family with Dad. Did you think I was as foolish as you?" David interrupted, his tone cold. David's face turned cold, and he interrupted me. "So, are you all planning to keep me here, living a poor and miserable life, unable to afford a burial place even after death?" I looked at the David before me. All the words got stuck in my throat, and I couldn't utter a single word. On that face, which was about 60 to 70% similar to mine, there was impatience and disdain. He wore a high-end suit with diamond cufflinks on the sleeves. Even imagining the cost of it was beyond me. He picked up the coffee cup from the table and took a sip, finally revealing his intention. But, for the sake of us being brothers, you need money, and I can give it to you, 500,000, and you impersonate me to take care of someone. What was originally a press conference had turned into a farce. People in the room began to look at him with increasingly strange expressions. Some even turned their microphones and cameras towards her. Mr. Smith, is what boss said true? Wasn't it Tang, the journalist, who accompanied her when she was down and out? Are those accusations you just made all false? He couldn't refute them and could only look to Lunar for help. Lunar, you know me best. I've been with you for so many years. How could I do such a thing? Lunar gazed down at him from the stage, smiling. Don't be afraid. Your actions are well documented today. The lawyers are here, and everything will be accurately recorded. Her voice was gentle and soothing. David, however, seemed to see something terrifying and suddenly started trembling all over. The press conference couldn't go on. I gathered my prepared speech, turned around, and left the stage. Lunar silently followed me. It's raining outside. Let me give you a ride. The rain was pouring down like a waterfall. I contemplated for 3 seconds but decided not to force myself. As I got into Lunar's Rolls Royce, I looked at her, and there was a hint of hidden joy in her eyes. But when I took out my phone, I realized that the events from the press conference had already been live-streamed. It was trending. People were arguing in several trending topics. So David took credit for the work of the journalist. How shameless can he be? What do you mean, took credit? This man who climbed up the ranks through the casting couch is capable of anything, even lying. They've confirmed that those explicit photos are photoshopped. Even if it's really him, he was doing it for money from the start. Once the job was done, he took the money. Why should he be feeling wronged? Am I the only one who thinks Lunar is pitiable? 2 men. Neither of them is any good. Both deceiving her. I suddenly felt choked up. I quickly turned off my phone and looked at Lunar. The rain flowed down the window like small rivers. The colorful lights outside formed a chaotic and abstract pattern. Compared to 3 years ago, the cityscape hadn't changed, but between Lunar and me, everything had changed dramatically. Back then, Lunar's family had called in a top expert. After 2 surgeries, Lunar had finally regained her sight. David had hired bodyguards at a high price to watch over me 24/7, making sure I wouldn't go to see Lunar or reveal the truth. However, on the day she regained her sight, that group of people had brought me to the hospital themselves. Through the closed hospital room door, I couldn't see Lunar, but I could hear her voice, filled with insecurity. David. Lunar, I'm here, David said softly, deliberately altering his voice to sound almost exactly like mine. Lunar didn't suspect anything, just a bit displeased as she spoke. You promised that when I regained my sight, you'd be the first person I'd see. You broke your promise. I didn't listen to the rest of their conversation. A sudden and intense pain surged through my heart, nearly engulfing me. From the beginning, the person who had been with her for those 2 years was David, not me, not Tom. David's bodyguards dragged me into a nearby lounge. Shortly after, she came in. Her expression was as proud as ever, but her lips had a small cut that was still bleeding. It was real. She really loved me and couldn't do without me, she said in a leisurely tone. You took good care of her these past 2 years, but to her, I did everything. What are you to her? A lowly person like you? You could never have any relationship with her. She suddenly choked up. Where are you going? Are you going home? Lunar's voice suddenly rang out, interrupting my memories. I lowered my head slightly and said, could you please take me to the office? Boss, I still have some work to do. She didn't start the car but leaned over, her hand resting on the steering wheel. She leaned closer, her expression looking a bit sad. Tom, do you have to use such a distant term to address me? Call me Miss Lunar or Lunar. Her familiar scent was so close, mixed with the fresh scent of rain. It began to wrap around me, dragging me into countless past memories. At this moment, I didn't want to endure it any longer. I pushed her away and looked at her coldly. Or how should I address you? Miss Lunar? Lunar? Should I call you David's name like you did 3 years ago when I got injured protecting you? She suddenly fell silent. I heard her voice, barely a whisper. Those 2 years are over, and the one engaged to you was always David, not you. Your life is back on track now, so why are you bothering me again? But this is not my normal life. Lunar looked at me with her eyes starting to turn red. I've never seen David from the very beginning. You were the only one I recognized. The intense pain welled up in my heart, and I tried to swallow it down. You're still lying to me. Lunar, the moment you regained your sight, I was right outside your hospital room. I listened as you believed David was me without any doubt. You hugged him and kissed him. She suddenly interrupted me. I didn't. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew he wasn't you. I suddenly fell silent. Lunar's voice sounded calm. The situation within Lunar family is very complicated. That day in the hospital room, there was more than one person with ill intentions trying to harm me. So when I realized he wasn't you, I made a decision. David is the perfect scapegoat, she continued. There was a hint of amusement in her smile, with a sharp edge. He likes to impersonate others, doesn't he? Well, let him impersonate to his heart's content. My mind suddenly flashed with images from news reports I had seen when studying abroad. They said David had narrowly escaped death in an actual explosion while filming. They also mentioned that he and Lunar had been injured when a giant billboard fell on them during an outing, putting their lives at risk. I didn't mean to deny you. These 3 years, a lot has happened. Actually, after Grandpa passed away, one Lunar family member after another came forward, trying to kill me, but they are either in prison now or under the ground. That includes my biological mother. Actually, I'm not afraid of dying. My cousin had to give up all his shares and went crazy, stabbing me once. I didn't even feel the pain. At that moment, I just missed you so much. The parking lot was quiet. Under the dim car lights, she took off her suit, revealing a scar on her chest, near her heart. Lunar family is too chaotic. It's not easy to obtain, but it doesn't matter. After today, David and the last remnants of those who supported him in his rise to power should all fall. The entire Lunar family, including me, can be yours. She inched closer, staring at me closely in close proximity. Her eyes, which used to be permanently unfocused and grayish, were now shining like stars from the entire universe. I swallowed hard and said in a low voice, "But you're already with David." "I've never been intimate with him, not once," she said, her tone becoming more emphatic. "In my whole life, I've only been intimate with one person, and that's you." Just that one sentence, and all the rational strings in my mind were completely cut. When I pounced on her and pulled open the neckline of her dress, a flood of intense memories rushed back into my mind. Her low points had been the most turbulent and bewildering 2 years of my life. Those emotions, unrestrained and inexpressible, had eventually transformed into the passionate connection between us. By the time the storm had passed, it was late at night. Lunar had parked the car in front of a villa. I took out my phone and saw a trending news article with a bright red, breaking label. #David taken away for investigation. Last month, my half-brother contacted him, threatening to expose his secrets if he didn't steal the bid documents and other confidential files from me. I said quietly, "You knew." Lunar suddenly turned to look at me. "Tom, did you arrange this?" I nodded, clenching my hand to stop the trembling. "I used you because I knew you wouldn't spare those who betrayed you, but I must personally send him to hell." I suppressed all my emotions and kept myself as calm and composed as possible while staring at her intently. "But, Tom, your hands are shaking." Lunar grabbed the hand behind my back and brought it to her lips, kissing it gently. "Don't be scared. You used me, and I'm happy about it. It means you have me in your heart. Of course, I'll stand by your side." I said, "The entire Lunar family, including me, is yours." The news of David being taken away for investigation created a buzz for 3 days. David family wanted to suppress the public opinion, so they sought Lunar's help. Sitting behind her desk, she listened to their request and smiled. "You all made it sound very touching. But when it comes to making a decision, I'm sorry, it's up to my fiancé." My father and his wealthy wife turned to look at me, and their faces changed. I smiled at them. "You should prepare yourselves soon, because very soon, you'll be just like him." Lunar held a press conference to clarify her relationship with David. Facing questions, she smiled ambiguously. "Fiancé? I've never admitted it was him. What I've always said is that the person who took care of me back then is the same." Someone asked, "But didn't he take money from David to take care of you?" Lunar's lips still carried a smile, but her eyes grew colder. "This journalist, I advise you to choose your words carefully. There are plenty of wealthy people in the world, so why would he only take money to take care of me? It's because he loves me." The journalists fell silent. I remained silent beside her. After this press conference, I released the recordings of David when he came to see me. A blind person or a discarded heir of a wealthy family, who would want to take care of her? She only raised me for a few days, and when a person dies, they die. Why should I give her money? Do you still want to keep me here and live the same poor and destitute life as you all, unable to afford a grave even after death? The public reacted strongly. Isn't he the one who has always portrayed himself as a noble and generous male celebrity? So, he and Tom are real brothers, and he willingly asked someone else to replace him. The clothes he's wearing, totaling over 100,000, and he won't even pay for his own mother's grave. How disgusting. I breathed a sigh of relief and submitted all the evidence I had collected to the police. Thanks to Lunar's complete separation from those people in Lunar family after she took over, she was not implicated. The day the David family was completely destroyed, I brought a bouquet of flowers and took Lunar to the cemetery to visit my mother. Her smile in the photo on the tombstone was still so gentle, but it always carried a hint of sadness. She was a kind and gentle woman who genuinely loved my father. Because of that, she couldn't move on all these years. Before she passed away, lying on her deathbed, she held my hand and told me not to blame David. She said, "Your brother is not of David family's blood, and he must have had a difficult time there." She didn't know. For all these years, David had been belittling and humiliating her, trying to win favor in front of David's mom and establishing himself within the entire David family. He started to rot from the day he was brought into the David family. I looked at the photo on the tombstone and said, "Mom, no one will ever think you were at fault for what happened back then. I have a good career now, and I have a girlfriend." Lunar stood by and corrected me in a low voice, "Fiancé." "All right, fiancé." I subconsciously turned my left ring finger, where I had a matching silver ring with Lunar. After going abroad all those years ago, I had hidden it at the bottom of a box, thinking I'd never have a chance to wear it again. I arranged the bouquet of flowers in front of the tombstone, stood up, and bowed. When I turned around, Lunar was gazing at me. "Tom, wait for me in the car outside. I want to have a private conversation with Auntie." The autumn night was cool. I waited in the car for a long time before seeing Luna return. Her coat was damp with dew. I turned my head to ask her, "What did you say to my mom?" She started the car. It took a while before she said, "I thanked her for bringing you into this world. Otherwise, I would have died in the depths of despair 5 years ago." When the dust settled, I successfully became a permanent employee and even got a promotion. I started handling interview assignments independently. It was about a high school girl who had been bullied by the rich and influential kids in her school for over a year. She had jumped from the school rooftop. Those kids have power and money, and no one can stand up to them. My boss looked at me, hesitating. "If you don't want to go." "I definitely want to go." I took the file from him. "Coincidentally, I'm planning a campaign against bullying on this topic, and I'll send it to you this afternoon." It was rare that Lunar was now wealthy and influential. With her backing, I naturally wanted to make the most of it. This interview, along with the subsequent anti-bullying awareness campaign I was planning, kept me busy for nearly half a month. I hardly had time to meet Lunar. She sent 20 messages before I had a chance to reply with an emoji while reading public opinion with a sandwich in hand. That evening, she told me she had a surprise for me and asked me to come home. I pushed open the door. The night sky was full of stars, and the room was filled with a warm mist. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to cling to me. There was only a small lamp by the bedside, and moonlight poured in like melting ice water. Despite this, the humid heat in the room didn't diminish. "Tom, kiss me." "Stupid, don't be so nervous." My gaze intertwined with her seductive eyes. It was full of temptation. By the time the storm had subsided, it was the early hours of the morning. Suddenly, I remembered something. I have to go on a business trip next month. An important interview in a remote area. It's about a girl from a mountainous region who has been abused by the villagers for a long time. She walked through the mountains all night to reach a town internet cafe and contact me. That place is quite backward, and local powers are deeply rooted. It might not be easy to penetrate, so I plan to stay there for some time. She sat up suddenly. "It could be dangerous." "Well, it might be." I didn't pay much attention and sat up, pouring her a glass of water. When I saw her staring at me intently, I tried to reassure her. "I'll do my best to protect myself, but this is the mission and duty of us media workers." Luna remained silent for a moment. Suddenly, she said, "I'm going with you. But don't you have an important contract negotiation next week?" I asked. "It can be postponed." "Why? There's really no need for." I tried to reason with her, but the words I hadn't spoken were silenced by Lunar's passionate kiss. That kiss continued down my neck, leaving me breathless. She whispered softly, "Because I am your most loyal guardian. You go and chase your dreams. I'll be there to protect you."